which was held between President Donald Trump and the North Korean President Kim Jong-Un. That summit was held on the 12th of June, and we waited for the dust to settle before we convened this session, so that we could get a better idea of the trajectory which world politics will take as a result of this summit. Waiting for it was because one didn't know whether it was going to be held or not and what its impact would be. And I'm very pleased today that Mr. Javed Jabbar is here, who was chairman of Pakistan's Nuclear Regulatory Authority, and he knows more about nuclear matters than any of us. And I hope that he will give his views on whether in fact the North Korean president will do away with his nuclear program. It is very difficult for me to find words enough to introduce Senator Javed Jabbar. We all know about him. He is very much on the public scene. He has been a senator, he has been a minister in many cabinets. He is known for his principled stand on many issues. He is engaged with issues of public interest. He is a writer, an author, and a media expert. And for us, the most important fact is that he is a member of our institute. So without saying any more, I would like him to lead the discussion.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you very much, Dr. Masuma Hassan, for your very gracious invitation, for your very gracious invitation and your generous introduction. It's such a pleasure and a privilege to be associated with you under your able leadership, if nothing else, apart from helping improve the standard of international relations dialogue, preserving this precious piece of real estate, withstanding all the builders and the destroyers of the landscape. It's become part of the architectural heritage. It is part of the intellectual heritage of Pakistan. But PIIA,
We have got it.
mashallah, there's a public heritage, has a heritage site. Sorry, pardon my ignorance. What a fine achievement, well deserved. And I'd like to thank your team, Secretary of the Institute, and all of them for facilitating this interaction. I see, as usual, a very fine representation of our members, and we are looking at an afternoon, hopefully, when we are blessed with showers of peace instead of present humidity. I'd like to begin by Bhutto. There was a need to send a delegation, a parliamentary delegation, and lo and behold, I was asked to lead the delegation to North Korea, to which I had never been. I'd been to South Korea. So there began a whole process of preparatory steps, and the North Korean embassy was very interested in finding out what kind of gifts are we carrying for Marshal Kim Il-sung. For some reason that had a very special area of interest for them, but it was possibly due to security reasons. Anyway, we had a very interesting visit. The late Senator Jabbar was also a member, and amongst the many memories was the fact that we had the privilege of meeting the Marshal on the 25th of December 1989, snowed under Pyongyang. And I began my submissions after he kindly welcomed us by saying, Marshal, we are privileged to be here on the birthday of the founder of Pakistan. And we are meeting the founder of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which he, of course, got up and gave me a great hug and a kiss. And I discovered, and this is said with no disrespect, but you know, it shows how media and photography can be so misleading. Because I discovered that he had, this poor man had this huge carbuncle, which is a big part of the anatomy, which had always been airbrushed out of his photograph. So the world never saw that, but it was a bit disconcerting to meet him. But of course, a remarkable leader. I will not dwell on the negatives that he had in his tenure, which are well known. I would like to focus on the present with his grandson. He was succeeded, as you know, by Kim Jong-il after Marshal Kim Il-sung died in 1994, and that led to a terrible period in North Korea's history, where there was a mass famine and hundreds and thousands of people are estimated to have died. And because North Korea has always been a very closed society, an accurate estimate has never been made, but they went through a terrible time in the 1990s. And now, of course, the whole new world, 2018. Let me begin by saying that this summit, to my mind, has, I don't want to load you with too many numbers, but I want to be specific. There are 7 regional implications. And they are regional because the first of them is the North Korea-South Korea relationship. Just the pure bilateral relationship. How are these two nations going to relate to each other as a result of this summit? Considering the differences between them, the enormous contrasts of territory and population, territory not being so much a factor as population. North Korea is about 25 million people, South Korea is 51 million people. But the contrast is much greater when it comes to the economy. The North Korean economy is not more than $25 billion. Again, it's a rough estimate because of the undocumented dimension of the North Korean economy. Whereas the latest estimate for the South Korean economy is $1.4 trillion, the GDP. So that straight away shows the contrast between the two. And incidentally, it is estimated by some that the personal assets of Kim Jong-Un are only $5 billion. So he's a very modestly endowed man compared to some others. But in human resources, in human resource development, there's a big contrast in terms of the quality of manpower, human resource in South Korea is mobilized. However, North Korea claims to have 100% literacy, which is always a feature of socialist and communist societies and states. Very strong emphasis on education and literacy. But the second regional implication is obviously the North Korea-South Korea USA relationship. How will this triumvirate manage this equation between these three countries? And the fourth is the two Koreas, America and China. And when I compartmentalize it this way, it's not to suggest that we are shutting off the spillover effect from the bilateral onto the quadrilateral. All things interact. But there are some things which are very specific to the Chinese relationship with North Korea and how that relationship impacts on South Korea and on the US. And the fourth is, of course, Japan, with which both Koreas have had a very intense and a very conflictual relationship, especially with the Second World War, even though in 1991, Japan apologized to the Korean people, both North and South, for the excesses committed during the Second World War. But the Japanese relationship is particularly important also because of the size, and later I'll explain. The fifth is the Russian bear. Russia does not figure too much in the current discourse, but Russia has a very strong presence in Northeast Asia. It has historically had a very important relationship with North Korea. It helped North Korea in the war against the United States. and the Red Army assisted the North Korean army in the early 1950s. The sixth is the relationship of this summit, the implications with East Asia and ASEAN. What fallout will there be on countries like whether it is Taiwan, or the Philippines, or Indonesia, or even Australia down there. And the seventh, finally, on a global perspective, all countries are affected. Because whether it is the Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is a global treaty, or whether it is just the fact that we are all members of the United Nations. And so there will be a global context in which this has to be discussed. So straight away, while it is a bilateral summit, there are multiple regional implications and concepts to consider. The first of these is, does this summit define a new direction for conflict management and conflict resolution without following a devastating war, as happened in the case of Vietnam, as happened in the case of Japan, both involving the United States. And we have a situation where Vietnam today exports most of its products to the United States, and a very friendly relations with America. Japan, as you know, reconstructed due to its own ingenuity, but also with significant American support. So here we don't have a war, as a result of which there is going to be or not to be a dramatic transformation in life in North Korea. That is an unknown, we don't know. But that is why I suggest, is this the opening of a new direction in conflict management and conflict resolution? And the other is that while on the face of it, it's a top-down example of diplomacy, that you don't wait years and years for various party talks to bring you together, which they've been attempting to do. You take a dramatic decision that two leaders will meet, regardless of the temperature, and that sets in motion a whole process of diplomatic resolution. Will this be a model for others to follow? Well, it's a deceptive model. Even before the summit on the 12th of June, there were secret back-channel talks, which they will not reveal at this stage. It will come out when documents are declassified. But we also know that the US Secretary of State paid a visit to Pyongyang, and that was publicly reported. But always these dramatic summits that take place don't take place in a vacuum. There's a lot of quiet preparatory work that goes in, which is not acknowledged. Even in the case where Kissinger flew from Rawalpindi to Beijing with Pakistan's crucial support, there had been talks for several years in Warsaw between Communist China and the United States. The third, perhaps, factor that comes up is the sheer asymmetry factor. We in South Asia are very familiar with the concept of asymmetry because of India and Pakistan. But look at the asymmetry here. My God. Can there be two nations as different from each other as North Korea and the United States of America? Whether it is territory, whether it is population, whether it is resources developed, the human resource dimension, the size of the economy. And it is the first time in nuclear weapon history, first time, that a country of this size decides to publicly threaten the United States with mutually assured destruction. Never before. If the Soviet Union did it, the Soviet Union actually has more nuclear weapons than even the United States. It has about 8,000. The United States has about 7,000. They could afford to indulge in that insanity of mutually assured destruction. But here is a small country, 25 million people, virtually the size of Karachi's population. It's such a efficient economy actually challenging what is considered to be the world's most powerful country. So that is asymmetry for you. And then we know that amongst the 9 nuclear weapon states, this is the only one that's made such a song and dance about it. We know that Israel is a nuclear weapon state, but it's not a declared state. And India and Pakistan, and their 1.3 million is roughly double what South Korea has. South Korea has armed forces of about 650,000 people. So the asymmetries end at the point of militarization, except when I come now to the key question of nuclear weapons, because that is the core of this whole summit, denuclearization. As to what is meant by denuclearization, neither the joint statement nor any statements made after or before the summit explain to us what does this mean. And this is very disturbing. If you read the text of the joint statement, I have the text with me. It's a very unusual statement, para 2. It says, Chairman Kim Jong-Un reaffirmed his firm and unwavering commitment to complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. But it's not only North Korea that has to complete denuclearization. It's obviously the United States. And there is no commitment by the United States in this formulation that the US will also denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. Point 3 in para 4 says, reaffirming the earlier declaration of Panmunjom in April, the DPRK, North Korea, commits to work towards complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. And then a minor thing, but very unusual to find in a joint statement being issued by 2 heads of state, where they name Mike Pompeo as the Secretary of State who will carry this forward. Knowing the way Mr. Trump manages to change his cabinet members every 6 months or so, Mike Pompeo may or may not last, but I find that very unusual. The reason why I'm pointing out these discrepancies is that this is not the first time that North Korea and the US have come to an agreement on denuclearization. There was a process called the 6-party talks. 6 parties, 6 countries, the 2 Koreas, Russia, China, Japan, and the United States. The talks have stalled from 2003 right up to 2009. Start, stop, because the North Koreans agreed. Then there was disagreement on verification. The key word which is missing from the statement completely. How do you verify? What does verification mean? The North Koreans can say, we invited journalists and they saw it. We invited Falana inspectors and they saw it, and we have denuclearized. But as Mr. Hashmi will well confirm, nuclearization, denuclearization is a very, very complex process. Step by step. By one expert estimate, it may take up to 8 to 10 years, 8 to 10 years minimum, to ensure that there is authentic denuclearization by North Korea. But what about the United States? It has 28,000 troops in South Korea. Let us say they withdraw these troops, which is very unlikely. Let us say that they don't even have nuclear weapons on South Korean soil. But the Americans don't depend on land-based nuclear weapons. They also use the sea. And there is no restriction on US nuclear-powered submarines floating under the surface between Japan, for example, where they have over 50,000 troops and bases, and the North Korean coast. At any point, North Koreans can say, you are not doing what we are doing. So this agreement is subject to many hazards, implications and interpretations. I'd like to conclude by saying that the process of how the world approaches this terribly elusive goal of nuclear disarmament, is that historic struggle going to be aided by this summit, or will it make no difference whatsoever? At the moment, regrettably, this summit and the outcome of this summit does not seem to contribute in any meaningful, purposeful manner to global nuclear disarmament. Because the paradox is that here we have a bully country, which is what the United States is, unfortunately. It is a bully, telling another nuclear weapon power, you denuclearize. And what do? I simply maintain my nuclear weapons, even though after the collapse of the Soviet Union, the number of weapons has been reduced to 16,000. But currently, not only the United States, but the United Kingdom, which is no longer a global power. It is a member of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. They have veto power. But the United Kingdom wants to augment and expand its nuclear weapons delivery capacity, which is absurd, absurd. So, this undue focus on only North Korea, while ignoring the fact that these nuclear arsenals continue to threaten the whole of humanity. And of course you can say, unlike the erratic, irresponsible behavior of North Korea, which is true, it is erratic, they make some very bizarre statements. They have a terrible record of human rights. By one calculation, 374 people have been assassinated, cold-bloodedly murdered under the authority of the current leader in very barbaric ways. The Deputy Prime Minister of Education was sentenced to death for what? For being inappropriate in the manner that he was sitting during a meeting. An uncle of Kim Jong-Un was killed because he was suspected of treachery. But how was he killed? He was killed by the use of anti-aircraft guns. Really have a bizarre mind to think of this. I mean, the Trump and the Americans are capable of many atrocities which have happened in Iraq, Afghanistan, but they are not, to be fair to them, as erratic and bizarre as North Korea. So, this focus on the summit as being a historic step forward. Historic only in the bilateral sense, yes. It's going to contribute to lessening of tension, but I think much more work needs to be done, both bilaterally between America and North Korea and South Korea and Korea. And the world at large has to watch this process with great vigilance and use an independent perspective to protect humanity from the blight of nuclear weapons and at the same time advance processes